And hello everyone, and welcome to the Pumpkin Copter Cast, the only video game show. So today I am joined by frequent PAX dev goer and fellow McElroy brother enthusiast, Cathy Kimport and I'm gonna try desperately to pronounce this right, Tursiops Truncatus Studios.
Yeah, good job. Well done.
Yep, thank you. So we'll start with just a brief introduction of you.
I'm Cathy. I am the programmer and level designer and kind of jack of all trades at Tursiops Truncatus Studios. We're a two-person studio at our core. We do bring in help from the outside world to kind of fill in the gaps, but it's mostly me on programming, Susan on artwork, and we've been at this for a while, at this game for a while now, so having fun with it.
Okay, so so when did you first discover video games?
I have been playing video games as long as I can remember. I think there are pictures of me on it might even be my first birthday, playing Defender on an Atari 2600. It might be second birthday, but by the time I was reading and writing and remembering things, I was already playing video games. I've always been drawn to them.
Okay, and what would you say was your favorite game and or games growing up?
Really, mostly like the overhead Zelda. So, classic Zelda, Zelda 3, Link's Awakening was kind of my holy trinity. A lot of, Super Mario 3, my favorite of that series. Didn't really get into the PC gaming at that younger age. So, it was mostly Nintendo console stuff. Um, a bit of the classics, bit of Metroid, bit of Castlevania, some a lot of the early Mac shareware games. I'm trying to think of some good examples, like one stunt copter thing where you dropped people onto a hay bale that we it's hard to remember some of those early shareware titles. Really hard to track them down, but that's what I grew up on. Some of the gold box RPG, the Forgotten Realms, the early kind of strategic RPG, little icon fighters, barely any visual graphics. The fireball was just like a little icon of fire that appeared over every square on the map that you were attacking.
Mm-hmm.
So
And what would you say is your favorite game and or games now?
now I play a lot of Stardew Valley, play a lot of Celeste, play a lot of recently into Breath of the Wild. Funny that I mentioned Link's Awakening earlier because they just re-released that, so it is now once again one of my favorite current games. A lot of the more twitchy action games, kind of some Russian Subway Dogs, Bleed, get some like good Crimson Clover in there too, just to kind of wake myself up once in a while. Crypt of the Necrodancer is another big favorite of mine. So I keep it mostly indie these days, the occasional exception.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly Zelda based exceptions.
And so, what made you decide to get into game design?
I had always had that bug in my ear or bug in my mind. Um, I think what's drawn me back to it time and time again, the idea of when I was reading books, first getting into novels like the Chronicles of Narnia. I always imagined I wanted to be able to explore Narnia. I wanted to be able to interact with the denizens of these fantastic lands. So rather than just telling a story with a typical story structure, that idea of being able to give people a playground where they can actually manipulate the world, do their own exploring, that's what has brought me back, even when career arc has made me stray from doing game design. But it's something I've in my heart I wanted to do since a very young age. I could bring out notebooks where I got a brand new set of markers, and the first thing I did with them was sketch out a level of a platform game. That so from I'm probably 5 or 6 years old, maybe a little earlier than that. But yeah, that whole the ability to explore, the ability to interact with a world is that's just what excites me about game design over other forms of storytelling.
Okay. And so now we can move on to the proper meat and taters of this game. So if we were at like a PAX and someone was wandering by our booth and they asked what the day we fought space was, is, and is going to be, like, what's the rundown you would give them?
So the day we fought space is a recommup. It is very tactile combat. It is very physical combat. It's a game not just about shooting enemies out of the sky. It's about getting them to crash into each other, getting some spiraling chain reactions going. It's a game about experimenting with a lot of crazy over the top weapons. Um, and it's got an underlying story to it too, a story about reclaiming Earth's destiny from alien invaders from a mysterious star system. That you'll kind of uncover that stuff as you go through the game, get to upgrade your ship, get to kind of tweak it, play with your favorite variations, and slowly but surely um, take the Earth back, take the whole solar system back from people who've invaded it.
Okay. So, so you've said it's a wreck 'em up, and I've seen that firsthand, having played it at the PAX, at the previous PAX South and East. But like when you say it's a wreck 'em up, as if to someone who might not be as familiar with that term, how would you like describe the gameplay in more detail?
So it is everything has a bit of weight to it in the game. So it is scrolling, it is shooting. So you might look at it and think it's a scrolling shooter, and that's a fair assessment of the game. But on top of that, every enemy's got a bit of weight to it. So you shoot an enemy, it doesn't just poof into an explosion. You'll get debris that can cascade down onto enemies below it. You can get, like, if you spot the right moment, you'll have a train flying at the top of the screen. Shoot the engine down, all its cargo rains down, and you can clear a screen that way if you time it. It's a little bit more forgiving than your typical shoot 'em up about how much damage you can take. It's a game where we want you to kind of get in the fray, get a little dirty. Your ship's going to get hit a couple times, and that's okay. It's not a game that's about making a perfect run through. There really is no perfect run through because it's going to be a different mission every time. All the levels are procedurally generated. So you're really challenged to adapt to the situation at hand, kind of stay on your toes. Um, just look for those opportunities where you can get a gravity driven combo, or if you see something that's explosive, shoot that at the right moment, catch everything in its blast, whether that's a minefield, whether that's some kind of cargo ship carrying explosive cargo, whether you're on a comet and there's ice chunks that you can kind of deflect into enemies, or use them as cover and then break them up and throw the chunks at enemies. But the physics gets into a lot of the weapons too. We've got some fluid-based weaponry. We've got melee weapons where your primary mode of attack is just swinging a wrecking ball around as fast as you can. That's really where the recommup spirit comes into play, is when you add a melee weapon to your ship. We got stuff like a chain launcher that you can cover an enemy in chains and watch it slowly get weighted down and sink to the bottom of the level, where it runs into the ground and gets destroyed. You can get a water cannon in there and get literal splash damage as the little water droplets kind of hit the surface of one enemy, short its weapons out, and then scatters and hits stuff around it.
Okay. And where did the idea for the signature recommup style come from?
For the recommup style, I think it actually came from our very first, our second demo. At one time, we were just doing a basic shoot 'em up on tablet, and we had one enemy in place that did have a little cargo carrier, and it would drop rocks on enemies down. It wasn't a full physics engine at that point. It was just like rocks went straight down and they'd take other ships down. It was everybody's favorite part of the game. So we kind of took a step back and we said, we can make an entire game around this concept. And we kind of retooled a lot of the level design to allow for more of these chain reactions. Once we had the physics engine in place to let us do some of these more tumbly stone falls, that's when we started playing around with some of the melee weapons, with some of the fluid weapons, with some weirder stuff like gravity wells and tendrils and flexible joints and all that stuff. But that part of the idea came from just watching people interact with early versions of the game and being flexible with the direction we wanted to take it. As far as what gave us the idea for the game in general, it's just kind of a lifelong appreciation for the genre, and we wanted to see where we could take it on tablet. So one thing I didn't mention earlier, I probably could have, it's a touchscreen controls, so it's a very tactile, very hands-on control scheme where you're kind of shaping your shots by pinching fire while you're piloting your ship. And that's something that came from playing a lot of ports of Bullet Hell on the iPad. I'm a much more tactile person than a visual person. And I just loved having the fine-tuned control to dodge bullets in like a port of a cave game on iPad. And that got me thinking, if you're using one finger to pilot, what's keeping you from using a second one to aim your shots? And if you're using a second one, what's keeping you from doing a third one to kind of set that firing aperture with tactile precision? So that's where that part of the idea came from.
Okay. And just as someone like me who knows absolutely nothing about any aspect of making a game, like how much from like idea to finished product did The Day We Fought Space take?
It's been several years now. Longer than most indie studios would recommend your first large game take. But I think it was 2012 is when we started working on that. And there had been some roadblocks on the way. There's been sometimes we had to stop and learn a thing before we could really continue with development. There's times we just had to, that I just had to set it aside for mental health reasons, for keeping sane. There's been some other stuff, other projects that have been important to myself and my artistic partner on this project. Um, so that's why it's taken a while.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you mentioned before that it's like primarily for tablets and smartphones. Did you always, and you mentioned this a little bit before, but did you always have the idea of like using touch-based controls to, manipulate the ship and its shots in the game, or in like earlier versions were you intending to eventually have like a more traditional like control or type?
No, the control scheme that's in there is the single oldest part of the game. The very first prototype we had, all it was, like before we even had enemies, before we had backgrounds, we just had a player ship shooting bullets with that control scheme. So that's been something from day one. And as I mentioned before, the idea came just from seeing how well traditional bullet hell, traditional shoot 'em up ported to a tactile control scheme. But at the same time, a lot of those games were limited by the designers clearly having a controller in their heads, even if there was no controller in the final game. So we wanted to kind of just leave any of those assumptions at the door and just see if we could come up with something that was intuitive, that was easy to teach, that felt good to do, that had enough of a reason to switch between wide shots and narrow shots. The very first thing we needed to do was make sure it was fun, even when nothing else was going on. So if I could dig up old footage, I know I've got some first build footage of just one ship that I had hand drawn in Illustrator, shooting little bullets into nothingness. But yeah, that idea has been with us from the start.
Okay. And you mentioned this before during a on the show floor interview with the YouTube channel Drop the Spotlight that there are no current plans to bring the Day We Fought Space to other platforms. Is that still true now, or are you just like focusing purely on the smart devices?
Yeah, we are focusing it. So the game's written in iOS native code primarily. So to bring it to another platform, we would have to write quite a bit of code from scratch again. So our resources are all pointed at iOS launch. We have no discrete plans for any other platform than that. We're not saying never to anything, but we couldn't even give you a ballpark, like how likely it is, and if it is, what time frame we'd be looking at. So iOS launch first, and then we'll just take it from there.
Okay. And now it's time for the question that anyone who's ever been on the show always understands perfectly, and there's never been any confusion on ever. Cathy, in your opinion, is video games?
I would say definitively yes, and I would have some stern words for anybody who would say otherwise.
Okay. And yes, with that, that brings us to the conclusion of this particular episode of the Pumpkin Copter Cast. I would like to thank Cathy for coming on board and talking about this game that you and your other half of the studios is working on. And is the game currently out now, or will it soon be out?
It's not out now, but we do have a Discord server. We did launch a public beta in August, and if you're interested in that, you should follow us. You should either sign up for our newsletter at thedaywefoughtspace.com, or you can follow us on Twitter. Either of those channels, you'll get directions to the Discord server. Once you're on the Discord server, then you get access to the beta. If you have an iOS device, if you have TestFlight, which is a free download for iOS. So it's a bit of a trail to get there, but there are paths to get to the public beta. And we would love to have more playtesters. Right now, the Discord is a little bit quiet, so we'd really love to hear what people have to say about the game. We got a lot of content in the public beta that has not been seen at any convention. So there's quite a bit more to the game than the little 5-minute demo we've been giving you tastes of as we've been traveling around the country. If you don't have TestFlight, you still want to play the game, next opportunity is going to be GDEX, Columbus, Ohio, this coming weekend. So if you are local, we'll see you there. Otherwise, we're probably going to be doing some more conventions in 2020. So you've not seen the last of us, Convention World.
Okay, and if any of the -7 of you listening to this enjoyed what you heard, you can help me out by subscribing to the Pumpkin Copter Cast and hitting that bell icon, and then hitting the menu of that bell icon where you get all the notifications, because everyone loves extra steps that shouldn't be there. You can follow me on the Twitters at tgorman83, and if for some unfathomable reason you wish to give me a money after you promise to make a commitment to give Cathy your money when you decide to buy her game, you can go to patreon.com/thepumpkincoptercast and give me a money there for whatever reason. And yes, the Day We Fought Space. Sign up for it, join their Discord, and just blow stuff up with great enthusiasm. So, yes, this has been the Pumpkin Copter Cast, and as I always say at the end of the show, whether I want to or not, have a gourd day, everyone.